Ever wondered what really matters in the world?
Is it peace,
technology,
the truth,
Aboriginal rights,
equality,
justice, wealth,
happiness?
I'm Katie.
I'm Owen.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Tom.
I'm Gillian. I'm Christina.
I'm Flynn. I'm Maddie.
And this is the University
of Western Sydney Whitlam Institute.
What Matters Writing Competition.
The What Matters competition has at its heart a very, very simple idea, and that is simply to ask the question,
What matters?
Write 400 to 600 words on that and let us know. And you're getting this real expression of what's coming from the depth of the heart, if you like, and the passions of these young people. And often they're unpredictable. Sometimes they're very personal and very powerful. We see it as part of helping young people to feel they can articulate what's important to them and be accepted and be listened to as part of, I suppose, nurturing a sense of civic engagement, of being involved in society, nurturing a sense that maybe things are tough but we can do something about it. The Whitlam Institute has three broad areas, and the first is Gough Whitlam's Prime Ministerial Library, the second is a Public Policy Institute, a think tank, but the third is very much about public education awareness and trying to nurture an interest in our social and democratic history, if you like. Perhaps the most specific thing we do for schools is this competition. What it does is it's part of that nurturing a sense of that we do live in a democracy, that we are interested in people saying what matters to them. We are actually interested in hearing, not just allowing it to be said, but hearing what they have to say. And we want to designate or allocate some sort of significance to that. And it never ceases to amaze me. Each year has a different character. But this year's lot were really interesting because they tended to be less personal, which has been a characteristic in the last year or two, less about their individual personal stories and more about issues and arguing quite complex cases where they strip away a lot of the arguments and they basically say, putting it simply, look, you know, we're all people here together, why the hell can't we get on?
A lot of the time, people tend to stereotype young people, especially with the image of the teenager being rebellious and not really caring about anything. I think it's really interesting just to hear about what the youth are really thinking about and what's important to them.
Well, the What Matters award ceremony is, I have to say, it's one of our favourite days of the year because what we do is we bring each of the winners and runners-up from each of the four categories here to the Whitlam Institute at the Parramatta campus of UWS, and we construct a whole day of activities for them. But during the course of the day, the young people have a writing workshop with Bernard Cohen, who's a very well-known children's author.
We've got an age range from year 5 or 6 to year 11 or 12, so I just treat them all like they're in university, where in fact we are. So I'll move straight into the reading now, and the first reading is going to be Flynn.
He only remembers snippets of the accident, and Billy does not even speak of it. It all happened on the perfect day in the middle of summer, as if nothing could go wrong.
Oscar and his so-called friends wished to become heroes. Oscar only wanted to do it for money, fame, and recognition. But the others simply want to do some good in this world.
Joe sat alone watching the waves in his special place by the sea. The disease had engulfed Australia. They said it was spreading towards Sydney. Anxious and afraid, Joe pondered in thought. Nostalgia burned within him, reminiscing about the days before Australia had changed. This epidemic had changed Joe. He was afraid.
Mrs. Miller wore a man's watch. Perhaps it was because such a large leather girth flattered her dainty wrist. Perhaps it was because it had been given her by a lover as part of a clandestine exchange of affection. The truth was that she wore it, and she felt largely indifferent towards it. The fact was that it was just like any watch. The hands moved punctually, and the face divulged the time frankly, and just like an eager, honest neighbour. And Mrs. Miller thought no more of it. But Mr. Miller felt very strongly about it. He would set his briefcase down on the floor so heavily that the entire house would shudder.
So as not to be noticed wandering in late, I slink up to the back wall, pressing my back onto the spongy wall. Oh, the wall's good. However, I feel like I'm lining up to get shot. One by one, my plump, rosy, however insanely evil teacher points to us on the wall, until only 3 of us are left. I feel so incredibly nervous for the fear of being noticed late. I bow my head, looking at my sockless feet, at the ankle socks of Jemima, and the knee-length socks of Timothy Pence.
Jordan Thompson sat, oblivious to the panic around him, staring at his glistening badge. It was only 3 months since he became a defender of I, and now he was expected to venture into the unknown and dangerous, to find a worthless criminal. Ridiculous. He was probably dead by now anyway. If he was not already floating on his back in the cliff-face sea, or face down in the sand of Split Desert, then surely the brick mountains or the uncharted land beyond would do the trick.
I smirked, but that was very much the style of Matron Tinselspirit, from her unilateral and unequivocal outfits to her unilateral and unequivocal songs. But now, the pop star, or as she liked to be called, Regina Caeli, would be revealed to the people for what she truly was, a garish, vacuous curse. Finally, the strings would be severed from this empty marionette.
Although difficult to reach via all known modes of transportation, being conveniently situated beneath a sheet of thick mist the locals call Waltag, and having never been officially recorded before, the dynamic land of Glesla is definitely worth the visit. My advice to the adventurous traveller would be to avoid, if possible, the line of constant confusion, as whilst being the only physical element of the land that remains constant, it can be awfully confusing trying to navigate across terrain that appears to look exactly the same over such a broad expanse of land.
I hope that you can continue to write with pleasure and gusto as I've seen today, so thanks a lot.
I think it's great that a competition like What Matters exists because you get to really hear about all the issues that are important to the youth of today.
The culmination of the day is the awards ceremony itself. But Mrs. Whitlam, Margaret Whitlam, will be here this afternoon. Up until a year or so ago, Gough would come himself every year. It's just a little bit harder these days. So it's a very important event, and the people who come to that, you know, are the students, their families, their teachers, but also a number of senior people from outside of the university who come really, I suppose, because they get a kick out of it, but also to show that it's important.
The competition, as you probably know, is simplicity in itself. We ask the students to write 400 to 600 words about what matters to them. The competition that started as just a little affair has really grown enormously in scope, stature and quality over recent years. And if you read this year's winners' pieces, their essays, you will understand why.
I think there is a clear sense amongst the number of the entries that, you know, they point, in a very honest way, they point to some of the planks in the eye of Australian society, some of the problems and dilemmas, but they do so from a sense of great love of the country and Australians.
Skills in, like, to have a skill in writing and to have flair and technique is one thing, but to have passion is another thing, and I think that is what gives your writing, like, the ultimate edge. So I think passion is important in entering.
Brainstorming about some different things that what matters to each and every one of us. And I was just like sifting through the ideas in my head, and then I just came upon Aboriginal justice. I thought it was going to be a really good idea for a story because in the holiday we had gone south, and at a restaurant we went to a lot. There was an elder who came and talked about Aboriginals, so it was very inspiring. And my story was called Aboriginal Justice, and it was about the justice of Aboriginals, what they've had to be through and what they've had to suffer. The Aboriginals have had to suffer the lack of education and rights and being able to keep their part of the land. It's just been taken over by British colony. I knew a lot about the Aboriginals to start with. I knew that, but I still had to do lots of research about the stolen generation and all the... I learned that they weren't allowed to vote until something like 1960s, so they've had to go through some hard times. By winning this competition, I think I've got the story out there of how tragic their lives is, so hopefully that'll make some difference, hopefully.
The title of my story was Multiculturalism Anyone, so it's a bit of a rhetorical question, quite sarcastic, really aimed to intrigue the reader into wondering about it. Initially wrote it for a school assignment that was based on Afghanistan and the effect of the war on the people living there, on civilians, and how that's caused them to come as boat people to Australia.
Well, I wrote about how we people are so obsessed about upgrading and keeping up with the Joneses, and just that sense of greed. I compared it to the people in Thailand, and the more unhappier, we're more unhappy because the more things that we have, and they have nothing, but they had enough because they were happy and they laughed and everything. And also that the increase of depression and suicide rates in Australia have gone up quite a lot, because I think that's because the overload of work that they do, and then they think that they can reward themselves with like getting the latest model of a computer or something, and then they just get more unhappier and unhappier until they can take no more, and then they just end their lives. Thought technology was like a good thing to write about. So I only wrote about how I thought about how people need to upgrade, even though they've got a perfectly new TV, but it's not on the wall. They go out and buy like a perfectly good one. Oh. That was what annoyed me, because when we went to Thailand, we visited really poor villages in like Chiang Mai and up in the north, and they had nothing. They had nothing at all, and even they were still happy. And I just compared that to modern first world countries that you know, they're like the more things that they have, the more unhappier they become. And in the villages in Thailand, they had absolutely nothing. They never seen themselves in a mirror before until we showed them the photos we'd taken of them on our digital cameras, and their idea of fun was just like sharing, eating together, cracking jokes and stuff. Whilst we Westerners, we think fun is like all the greed, and all we care about is what we have and not what other people have.
My story is called Should the Truth Go Unsaid, and it was about WikiLeaks and the stuff what it does, and the good things, the bad things, how it does it. Sometimes if they go too far, like they could leak out documents about a government's weaknesses, and that could give other countries opportunities to attack or stuff like that, so that could be bad. The things WikiLeaks does is it puts powerful people in their place, and it can show them that there are limits to what they can do. So they can't just go around doing whatever they want, because it could come up to the media and then they will be put down. I think what the government does affects us more than what we do. Like, what we do won't really affect the country.
Well, it's about the way the Australian government deals with them when they come here mainly, and the way it's just not at all nice the way they do it. And I've mainly got it because at my old school down in Victoria, there was these two really nice girls who came from Afghanistan. They'd lost their mum and came with their dad, and they'd been through all that kind of stuff. And then they've gone to our old school, and now one of them's come up to be really good school captain, and they're really smart girls now. So it's just, when I was researching for that, I found out a lot, and I found that it's like not even illegal to come here, even by boat, and that there's only one refugee for every 1,000 Australians. So it's the fact that we're scaring them away, like especially sending them to Malaysia when I think we should be welcoming them, because they've got skills just like everyone else, so Australia needs them. Because I think that they're people just like everyone else in Australia, so they deserve the same rights. I think we should firstly care for them, give them whatever medical help they need, look after them, then make sure that they've got whatever they need in the community and they're getting their education just like normal, so they're fitting in. We should be caring for the asylum seekers by letting them fit in the community, giving them the education and stuff they need. I think it's just racism that we're thinking that if they're not white, they're not people.
Well, it was actually that I was at school and I saw one of my friends who was obsessed with teenage magazines. She pulled one out of her bag and I had a quick flick through of what was in it, and it was all celebrity gossip. And I just thought that it would be really important for the youth of today to know what's actually going on instead of knowing what beverage their favourite celebrity drank on the weekend. My story was called It's Time, because I thought that would be fitting with the Whitlam Institute. And it's basically about how the teen-targeted media is failing to inform its audience about real issues in the world today, because a lot of the time we're sort of bombarded with this monotonous celebrity gossip all the time. And if you pick up your average magazine, for example, that's targeted towards teens, you get either celebrity gossip or advertisements. So I think it's really important that teenagers today know what's going on, because eventually we'll be part of the generation that has to take the reins. And if nobody has any idea what's going on, then how are we going to do that? So I think that's really important.
I think there's a really toxic effect. Well, it's a really sort of people are desensitised to the fast food industry and really to the cruelty which goes on to animals. Sort of within it, the sort of globalisation of fast food has led to all this cruelty to animals, and people are unaware of it, I think, too much.
I wrote about how we should amend the Marriage Act, which was amended in 2004, to make it illegal for same-sex couples to get married. And I think that we should re-amend that, and we should revisit that and make it legal for everyone to get married. So it's actually been a lot in the media lately, and that's what piqued my interest. But then I started reading more and more about it, and I realised that it's just another form of discrimination. And we're a country that says that we don't discriminate based on sex, race, age. So why should we discriminate based on sexual orientation? And I think that's what the question is. I think people often try to mask the issue by saying things like, oh, well, you know, it's about family values, it's about sticking to tradition and sticking to religious and conservative values. But I think they're all just a smokescreen for homophobia, to be honest.
What matters to me is people these days, they are really obsessed, and all they want to do is have the best of everything.
Things that matter to me are obviously climate change, because that'll affect future generations and me, and also like discrimination, and basically the main points.
I wish that most people were comfortable, so not being tortured or starving or anything like that.
When I think of the war, the first thing that pops into my mind is armies going out to fight and lots of them dying. It's to fight for the country of not very necessary.
I think